Welcome to the Diving Deeper discussion program. I'm your host, Randy Isaac, and I'm here on behalf of the American Scientific Affiliation, where we discuss articles and other publications of our journal, Perspectives on Science and Christian Faith. But in this program and the subsequent two programs, we will devote it to the ASA annual meeting, which will be held in Canada shortly, and we'll talk more about that. But we're delighted to have with us the two program chairs, and I'm happy to introduce them to you at this time. Janet Warren, welcome. And Robert Mann.
Hi, everybody.
Okay. All right. So as we usually do, I will chat with them a little bit to let you get started, and we're going to get going. We had no advanced discussion questions this time, understandably, because it's so different. But we will, I'll talk with Robert and Janet a little bit to set the stage, and then we're going to go into details of the program, and then open it up for a discussion where any of you can raise your hand. Again, if some of you haven't been here before, the protocol is that you go to reactions icon at the bottom, and you select the raise hand option, which should be there, and raise your hand, and then I will call on you, and you can unmute yourself at that time. Until we open the microphones, none of you are able to unmute, so it's nothing that's wrong with your system. So, all right, now most people know you, Janet and Robert, so I'm not going to spend too much time in it, but I'd like just to get a little bit of background from you. So Janet, wait, first of all, both of you are from Canada, right? You're both CSCA members? Yeah, right. Yeah, I think you both are. So Janet, what part of Canada are you in? And tell us a bit about how you got roped into CSCA.
So I'm in lovely Dundas, Ontario, which is actually officially part of Hamilton. And it's close to McMaster University, where we had the 2014
right.
ASA meeting. And for Americans, it's about an hour and a half from Buffalo and Niagara Falls. As some of you know, I was on the council for the CSCA for the 9 years. Mm-hmm. And apparently people thought that I would miss involvement so much that barely had I stepped off council and I was asked to help with the be a co-chair for the annual meeting.
So wait, back up a little bit, Janet. How did you get to know about the CSCA?
So I'm one of those random people. I Googled online for a science faith conference. That would have been 2011, so 12 years ago. And I found out about the one near Chicago, and showed up. And as they say, the rest is history.
That's great.
So the Canadians found me, I guess, from the program, and quickly told me about the Hamilton group. There was Bob
snowballed fast.
Got me involved. Exactly. But
right.
As most of you, I believe, have attended conference, you know what a wonderful community it is.
Right.
And it's way beyond, just the program. Although, fascinating talks. That's one of the things I loved, is just the variety and the diversity of topics and such interesting people. And I could go on, but I won't.
Yes, you could. Well, we'll hear more from you later. Robert, where are you located, and how did you get into CSCA?
Well, by profession, I'm a physics professor at the University of Waterloo, which is where I live. That's about an hour's drive northwest of Hamilton. However, right now I'm at my cottage on Manitoulin Island, which is it's a large island that's on Lake Huron and Georgian Bay, the largest island in the world that's on a lake, actually. And
wait, we got to get all the superlatives correct here. It's the largest island that is on a lake.
Largest island in the world that is on a lake, yes. And my cottage is on Lake Manitou, which is the largest lake in the world that's on an island that's on a lake.
Okay, there we go. Now we got all the surprise. Okay, we got that straight. All the
so regarding
CSCA.
CSCA, I've belonged for over 40 years. Or about 40 years, I guess. I first learned about it when I was a postdoctoral fellow at Harvard University. And I was attending a church called Grace Chapel, and several ASA people went there. And sometimes on one Sunday, they had put up a display, and I saw the journal. I thought I never knew anything like this ever existed. And so I became curious, and I found out there was a Canadian group, and I joined. And then I became involved from the middle 80s when 1984, when I returned to Canada. And I've been involved ever since. I was a president for a number of years, and I've been on the council. And I was rather involved with the meeting Janet mentioned in Hamilton. When that was 2014, I think. And now as program co-chair with Janet.
Cool. That is great. Okay. It's clear from all you said why you two were chosen or asked to do this. So let's get right to the point here a little bit. Tell us a bit about how you came up with this particular topic, which is, let's see, moving forward, the future of science and faith.
So, as you may know, it's the CSCA's 50th anniversary this year.
Right.
So, and we wanted to celebrate that in conjunction with the ASA annual meeting. So it seemed appropriate when we're sort of looking back from 50 years, we also want to be looking forward. What's the next 50 years going to look like? Of course, we may not even know what the next 5 years are going to look like. But that was the general idea. And of course, you want a theme that's going to incorporate multiple diverse topics, which certainly has done.
Okay, Robert, you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. I think the traditional science faith discussions have been with cosmology and evolution. But my personal feeling is, and has been for quite a while, that we should be discussing a whole lot more than that. And so at this meeting, we have tried to cover all of the sciences, both pure and applied. And we also have one of the main speakers is a theologian and will speak specifically to theological issues. So the reason for the future of science and faith is, I think, more than ever, things have been happening that Christians need to come to grips with. Issues with the environment, issues with artificial intelligence, all kinds of things. I could name more.
Right. Yeah. Okay. That's excellent, and I fully agree. And I'm very supportive of efforts to step back and look at the big picture of where we come from and where are we going. So, with that in mind, I would like to exercise my prerogative as a host here and monopolize the microphone for a little bit because we're going to turn to you shortly and talk about all the plenary speakers, talk about the topics and your vision of what's in the future. But I think we need to position the future in the context of the past. So permit me for a few minutes here to give you my big perspective of the past and where has the science faith community been in the history of the ASA, particularly from the ASA perspective. And with that as a basis, we can think about how to go forward. So as most of you probably know, ASA was founded in 1941 at the instigation of Irvin Moon, who spent the late 20s and 30s with a highly successful series of lectures, sermons from science, and it was very popular. In fact, he had a great demonstration in 1937, about 1 million volts through his body and all that. And in the 1939 World's Fair in San Francisco, he was a big hit. So he was riding on a wave of great interest in science. And so he recommended to Will Houghton that we start an organization like this. And voila, it started a few months before Pearl Harbor, went into a hiatus for a few years. And then in 1946, had the first real ASA annual meeting. And we've had one ever since, with a summer something substituting the one in 2020. But we've had one. And I'll give a sneak preview because all of you made the wise choice to be with us today. We are working on, and don't tell Vicki that I told you all, we're working on a web page that will give you immediate and easy access to all programs and all abstracts for all of the annual meetings, going all the way back to 1946. And we're all, I'd say, almost done. And if we don't run into any snags, we'll have it done by the time of the annual meeting. But it's a little slower because I in working on it, I kind of get caught reading some of it. So it's a little tough. But so let me kind of trace what I see as the thread of the annual meeting. So clearly, the ASA was started in a perspective where the key central focus, I think, was correlating the Bible and the scientific results. That was kind of the overriding theme. And you'll find in the first few annual meetings that there's a variety of science topics that kind of fit in there. But moving rapidly forward, it seems to me that the 50s, especially the late 50s, the 60s, and into the 70s, the key topic was the age of the Earth, and then blending into the age of the universe and all that. Because by this time, heliocentrism had long been settled. By the way, we should say nothing is ever settled in this field, right? Geocentrism is still alive. So nothing gets settled. So what I'm really talking about is the focus of the ASA. Where was the sweet spot? Where was the discussion? Where was the cutting edge? And that was no longer the cutting edge by the time the ASA was founded. But the age of the Earth was, and that was the key. And the role of annual meetings are very key. The 1963 meeting was notorious. Some attendees described it to me as being a raucous meeting. And it culminated in a number of ASA members getting together and forming the Creation Research Society. And over time, the Young Earth segment of the ASA largely, not entirely, but largely migrated to that. So the real key focus at that time was the age of the Earth and flood geology, the global flood that kind of came together. That was kind of the central dominant theme, though the other topics came in. But then in the 70s, it migrated to evolution. So the 70s and the 80s, 90s really migrated with the top focus being on the evolution of non-humans, mainly biological evolution there. And that, of course, had its own anti-reaction. And so the 1980s saw the rise of intelligent design, and it culminated ultimately later on into the formation of the organizations like the Discovery Institute, the Old Earth Society, the Reasons to Believe, etc. But the annual meeting, really was a key place where the intelligent design versus evolution debate took place. And there are many notable events, and I think most notable perhaps was the 1992 meeting in Hawaii that had an impromptu volatile debate between Owen Gingerich and Philip Johnson. And attendees remember that very well. So there was a lot of that, and over time, the ID advocates tended to migrate to their organizations and left the ASA, and it's no longer really as big an issue. It still continues, but not as big an issue as it was. Then in the 2000s, we started seeing a continued solidification around the biological evolution piece. And we saw the, I'm talking about all these spinoffs. I mean, ASA has spawned more science faith organizations than any other one. We spun off, we didn't do it, but Francis Collins put together BioLogos, largely from ASA members, and did so specifically to be an advocate of evolution rather than the focus that we have as being neutral on topics, not taking a stand. And one of the key annual meetings there that I recall was 2009 in Baylor University, where which I believe had a seminal influence in shifting the conversation from the generic biological evolution to that of human ancestry and the historical Adam. And that was a focal point that really changed the conversation there. That, of course, continues to this day and always will. But it's also kind of dying out, I feel. I mean, at least in terms of the cutting edge, most interesting piece. And so I feel as if this is a perfect time to be discussing the future, because we see these different waves of topics coming along from the past. And I think we need to stop and think, what are the next wave, plural, not singular, what are the next waves of cutting edge issues in science and faith that ASA really needs to focus on and really emphasize and pursue and make sure that we enable the proper discussions for that. Okay, I've gone on and on too long. It's my view. It's not a complete view, and some of you may differ with bits and pieces. But at any rate, that's kind of how I see it. So with that in mind, let's turn to the future. And Robert and Janet, you've put together a incredible program. I'm very impressed. You know, this has got to be a first, right? We have, if I understand it right, we have 5 plenary speakers, 4 of which are women. Dot, I see you smiling big there, right? This is, back from the days when we had a hard time finding one. We've got 4 out of 5. That's got to be a record, and means you've done well. And it's particularly important because we didn't sacrifice quality for that. We went up because one of those women is a Nobel Prize winner. So it just speaks well for the whole movement and for what many of you have done in terms of the Christian Women in Science kind of program. All right, enough of that. Let's go through the plenary speakers, and then after that we'll open it up for discussion a little bit. So let's go in sequence here. The first plenary speaker we'd like to talk about is Dennis Alexander. He's going to talk about the genetic issues, genetic determination. So if either one of you could tell us a little bit about who Dennis Alexander is, many of you know him, and then let's talk about why did you pick this topic, what is important, and how do you see this as a future issue? All right, simple questions. Huh? Who wants to go? Janet, Robert?
Sure. So Dennis is the one of the 5 plenary speakers that I have actually met before. He came to Hamilton once and gave a talk for our local group. So when we're looking for plenary speakers, we're looking for obviously future, the cutting edge topics, but also diversity. So Dennis is from the UK, so as you know, we've invited the Australian and UK groups to join us for this meeting, particularly. So as a representative of the UK, he was involved with the Faraday Institute, many of you may be familiar with, for many years. And his recent, we also looked at people who'd recently published, well-known books, etc., as again, where things are at now and where they're going. So he's talking about his recent book, Are We Slaves to Our Genes? So basically, genetics and then intertwining with issues of determinism, free will, etc. And I actually finally got round to reading his book, and it is very readable, and I highly recommend it. But one of the things that I found fascinating and I'm always marvel at, and I shouldn't be surprised because we do encounter this, but it's just the overlap between topics. So he has a chapter on genes and gender. And of course, we have Megan DeFrancis speaking on gender issues. So he also had a chapter on genes and transhumanism. And we have another theologian speaking on transhumanism. Mm-hmm. So the overlap of topics, and of course, genetics is genetic engineering specifically, mm-hmm. And Christian ethics surrounding that is a continual future topic. And I know we've had mm-hmm. James Peterson speak to us on that before, and
okay.
topics. So it's not entirely new, but it's still one of the ways of the future.
Right.
And I think very important for Christians to be aware of.
Yeah. Robert, you want to add anything on that?
No, I'm fine.
All right. So let me ask a little bit on this point, which is that how does this focus, are we determined by our genes? What's new about it? Because as I understand it, the nature versus nurture debate has been going on for how many decades? I mean, the answers have vacillated, from one decade to another a little bit, but is the issue different now?
So a couple of things. First of all, I should just clarify, Rob and I each, we divided up topics between us. So I'll be speaking on the ones that I was the primary one involved. He'll be speaking on ones he was primary involved.
That's fine. That's good. Okay,
so I was primary on this one. Mm-hmm. So actually, the among scholars anyway, the nature nurture debate has long been settled, and that it's both and that's been pretty agreed on for, I would say, a few decades probably at this point.
So why is this a cutting issue now?
Right. So that's at the academic level. So it's still there's still a lot in popular press, for example, that makes assumptions about, my genes made me do it, that kind of thing. So, I'm guessing that's a lot what Dennis is going to dispel, a lot of those myths. But you're right. I'm not. I'm just trying to think what's radically new. I mean, some of the new implications for topics like transhumanism and gender issues. It has implications for those issues as well. It has implications for artificial intelligence. So I'm and the genome, as you know, has been what's the word? Known, unraveled, decoded for a number of years as well. But there's still, now that we have the full human genome, there's still a lot that's being discovered and put into practice or applied. So there's new information on that.
Right. So what you're saying then is the novelty here, or this whole topic, is not one of a high-level issue of nature versus nurture, but rather it's now at the more detailed level of the application in certain areas.
Partly, yes.
Coming up, especially with the new genetic information, in terms of, well, here's a new area, like the gender issues or something like that. These are new issues where the population is not, the public is really not well informed.
Correct.
And we have to do a lot of that. Okay, that's good. All right, so maybe later on we'll have some discussion on that point. Now, let's turn on the second one. Whose is that? Is that yours, Robert? Joanna Ning? Is that how you pronounce her name? Joanna. I'm
Ing.
sorry. Ing. Okay.
Joanna Ing.
Ing. I got it. All right. Yeah. AI.
Right.
It's a hot one. All right. Tell us about that, Robert. Who is she and what's her role here?
In the meeting, where, as I said earlier, we're trying to cover the broad range of sciences: physical, life, mind, information. And Joanna comes from that latter category. She is formerly worked for IBM and won top awards there as being one of the up-and-coming geniuses. What she does now is use artificial intelligence to assist disabled people in tasks that I think they would otherwise be cognitively impaired in doing. So she has quite a number of patents. She's authored 2 computer science books. She is able to deal with both the complex abstract things about artificial intelligence as well as very practical things in terms of what she's doing with her company that she calls Deverum Design, which is does what I said earlier for the disabled. So I think what's new here, especially as we just saw with the advent of Chat GPT, we've got I've seen a lot of news articles where you feature major computer science people saying we better put the brakes on this in order to understand it. I think artificial intelligence does have something to say to our theological concepts of the Imago Dei, being in the image of God, as well as very practical things like how on earth can we ever assign homework anymore if students could just ask ChatGPT the answer? So there's a whole range of issues there, and hopefully we'll have very good discussions.
Okay, so let's dig into that a little bit. There's no doubt, everyone knows here that AI is big stuff now, and it's very controversial. But help me understand what the real concerns are regarding science and faith. Where's the faith aspect? I mean, we all understand the disruption to society and our culture. Okay, that's huge. That's huge. And so from that aspect, we do it. But why should the ASA get involved here? I mean, what is the aspect of science and faith? Where is that component within the AI discussion?
Well, I think part of the faith discussion is in what it means for someone to be in the image of God. And if a computer can very accurately simulate another person, at what point, I mean, is there something analogous to a theological Turing test, for example? I think these are questions that were always in the background, maybe in science fiction, but they're now becoming much more pointed in a theological sense. I think the other major faith concern is ethical and practical. How do we use a technology that many of the experts are saying very soon could be out of control and could generate possible dystopian scenarios in which, if you like, the robots take over or AI takes over? There's all kinds of opportunity for malicious treatment. Christians need a prophetic voice here, a thoughtful theological voice. So those are what I would see the 2 main issues being.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Although I would have a little bit of the same problem that I did with the engineering and the technology area, because I have a hard time differentiating between the role of ethics, for example, in between the Christian perspective and the humanist perspective. You know, it's basically I don't see the differentiation. Where's the uniqueness of the faith context in this discussion?
Well, sure, there's certainly overlap without any doubt, but not all ethical systems are fully equivalent to one another. And
that's true, but within this context, why are they different?
Well, I think that's a question we need to ask as a Christian community. What do we bring that is unique? Where can we work cooperatively with others that don't share our faith perspective, like the disciples going to Jesus saying, "Hey, look what those guys are doing," and Jesus says, "Look, don't bother them. They're if they're doing my work, leave them alone." So I think we have some of that. And I don't fully have the answers to those questions. But I think they are there. I think we need to ask, what do we bring to the table that is uniquely Christian? What do we bring that is not, but we need to work with others? And likewise, what are our boundaries here?
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So what I should have asked about Dennis, we come back to it. So let's stop a bit in terms of the, is there a set of contributed papers that feeds into this, or is that a theme that will be pursued later in future years?
Do you mean at the conference?
Right. At their annual meeting.
There are not many. There are a few.
Okay.
We have lots of environment papers this year, not as many AI tech papers. We've only got a few there.
Yeah, and you don't have a plenary speaker on that topic, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that actually worked out quite well, because environmental and creation care is one of the other hot topics. And we had talked about, we had invited Catherine Hayhoe actually to be a plenary speaker.
Good Canadian source.
Right. But I think it's telling that we got, a large majority of abstracts on creation care, even some of them in different areas impact bioethics creation care. And of course, we don't have a lot of control over, what people submit. So it's always interesting to see. But yeah, that was very interesting, and I think really fills in the gap left by not having a plenary speaker on environmental concerns.
Yeah, fair enough. I'll just venture that I'm a very strong advocate of the environmental and the creation care perspectives. I also have the difficulty of seeing the differentiation between the Christian approach and a lot of the humanist approach. Anyway, we'll leave that for now.
Well, I could add a comment if you like.
Yeah, please.
I think one of the key issues, because on the surface, when you're looking just at behaviors, they're going to look very similar. But I think one of the key is in terms of motivation.
That's it. Yeah, it's motivation. It's not real. I mean, it's not the action. The action isn't different. It's the philosophy behind it, right?
Right.
Okay, gotcha. All right, let's move on. Donna Strickland, our Nobel Prize winner. That must be yours, Robert.
That's right. So yeah, Donna, I've known Donna for over 20 years, probably 25 years, I guess now. And she is a member of my department. And as I think everybody here knows,
really, that's great. So you get a share of that, don't you?
Yeah. So she won the Nobel Prize in 2018 with her former PhD supervisor for the very first paper she wrote, which basically showed how to boost the power of a laser by a factor of 1,000,000. And I think her talk will be, she calls it a laser hammer, but it basically just upped everything in lasers that we knew into a new era back at the time, which was 1986. So she will tell us some about how she won the prize. Donna lives in my neighborhood. I could walk to her house in about 10 minutes from mine. She goes to
That's great. Do you go and rub her doorknob every once in a while?
No, I don't do that. She's out of town a lot since she won the Nobel Prize. But she does when she can. When she's in town, she attends a United Church in the neighborhood. It's called the Cedars. Donna is not, she's from United Church of Canada is a mixture of Methodists, Presbyterians, and Congregationalists that started almost 100 years ago, 1925. Canadians will know what it is, but most Americans maybe are not familiar. It is a more liberal tradition of Christianity. Donna's not as familiar with the evangelical community. One of the new things I think she will bring to the table, and I asked her to say something about, is an initiative she's working on with a number of other people on rebuilding trust in science. And I think this is a very pertinent issue. The pandemic, amongst other things, showed that despite the fact we live in the most highly educated civilizations in history, there's a lot of mistrust about science, about medical science. And I think we need, as a society and as Christian communities, to ask why. I partly feel I understand it. The hardcore elements of the scientific community have been very, at times, very denigrating of the Christian community. So why are they so surprised that trust has been lost? One might want to ask that question. But nevertheless, we are called to be reconcilers and peacemakers, and I think we need to talk about this kind of issue.
Mm-hmm. So help me understand exactly what she's going to talk about and where her focus is.
Well, I asked her to speak about that initiative because I thought people coming to the meeting would be interested.
Right.
What is going on in our churches with trust in science?
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay.
What are scientists allies or are they adversaries?
Mm-hmm. And there seemed to be a broad spectrum of people who have a vested interest in disrupting that trust.
Well, on both sides.
Somewhat. Oh, yes.
Yes.
Whole spectrum.
I agree. Sadly, yes.
Right. And that makes our job tough, but all the more important.
Yeah.
All right. How about Victoria Lorimer, who handled that? Was that yours, Jen?
Yeah, Victoria is a theologian in Australia. And as mentioned, we wanted to include UK and Australia. And she's done a lot of work on the interface between theology and transhumanism. So she's going to be speaking on transhumanism, which, like technology, AI, etc., is certainly one of the hot topics of today and one of the areas of the future of science and faith. Yeah, I'm not sure what else. She's been involved in the Australian ISCAS, the Australian Group for Science and Faith, quite a while, I believe. And carry on. No.
Well, it's so this again seems to be, and I guess almost all of the plenaries now, these are more leading edge topics. You don't have a current set of contributed papers coalesce around it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So it's the kind of thing. Hopefully, we raise the interest and stimulate papers for the future. All right.
I mean, we have had, I know, past ASA meetings, it has certainly been touched upon.
Yes, it's been touched upon, but not really at this high level, I don't think. Yeah.
Right.
Maybe once or twice.
And I think one of her unique approaches is taking the theology based on the creation mandate. And I don't want to guess what she's going to speak about, but we're called to develop creation. But where's the limit on that? And where does transhumanism come to the pride factor that we want to become greater than God instead of accepting our limits?
Right.
So that's the integration issue. It's not just about ethics. It's about theory and theology as well.
Okay, very good. Megan, our fifth plenary speaker. Is that yours too, Janet?
That was sort of a joint effort. We had tried a couple of other people, but certainly sex and gender is one of the hot topics of today, and I think a very important one that Christians, and especially Christians who are scientists, need to be well informed about. She's quite a number of years ago wrote a book on intersex, and she's done other writing as well. And she also she comes at it from a theological perspective more than, but she's done good scientific research in the process. I think, and she also has branched out into doing more counseling. So I think she would bring a pastoral perspective as well of caring for intersex people. And intersex is one area that I think is, one of the areas where science can really challenge is some theological conceptions.
Okay.
Yeah. Could I make a comment here?
Yes.
Though I'm conscious people probably want to start asking questions, at least I hope they...
We're about ready to open it. Right.
This is likely to be the most controversial speaker of the lot. And Janet and I recognize that, but we think it's important that the Christian community not just ignore this. This gender issues have exploded across all campuses in Canada.
Mhm.
I expect the same is true in the United States. And what do we say to this as Christian? I'll be honest with you, a lot of this really pushes my boundaries, but I think it's better that we discuss it instead of pretend it doesn't exist. It's particularly pertinent on my own campus, where a week ago, a former physics student walked into a philosophy class on gender and stabbed the professor teaching the class and two other students during the class.
Last week, this happened?
Last Wednesday.
You're kidding.
9 days ago, 10 days ago. I am not kidding. Go Google it.
Oh, that's awful.
I actually taught this student not to do that. But
I don't expect
but he was a student in one of my classes 3 years ago, a first-year class. So I mean, with hundreds of others.
Word.
But it's a shock. And from all the evidence indicates he did this because he didn't like the topic of the class. So this is a very pertinent issue.
Whoa. Yeah.
Anyway, I'll leave it there.
Okay. Well, let me just amplify. Because that was
Bob Getty's got his hand up.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to get to those in a minute. So this was last year, wasn't it, when Tony Jelsma had the gender dysphoria discussion? That has been one of the hotter topics that really pursued on the discussion forum that we have. And just to repeat it now, we've got a discussion forum open. We can continue this one, although we haven't generated a lot of controversy here. So it may not do. But yeah, of all the topics, I agree with you. This is the only one that's hot and prone to controversy and is important for us. And one of our missions, one of our goals is to display dialogue among disparate views, in a setting of civility and respect. And it's not always easy to do. So, so this is a key one in that range. So, wow, that's a great high-level view here of the program. And so, Becky, if you could open the microphones for everybody. We're going to turn to the audience, and we're going to start with none other than Bob Geddes. How are you, Bob?
Well, fine. I hope I'm coming over okay, because internet at the cottage here is a bit spotty. So if not,
it's a bit shaky, but we can hear you.
I'll turn my camera off, but I'm still here, and you'll hear my voice. I just wanted to jump in before you got going on the discussion to add one more element about the theme. And that was a word that was overlooked in the introduction. And the theme is moving forward together, the future of science and faith. And being on the planning team, having some background on how that theme came together and understanding of it, I wanted to emphasize too that the together was also in reference to the relationship between the ASA and the CSCA, particularly because of the occasion of the 50th anniversary and the meeting being held in Canada. I know it is the interest of the host to help further strengthen and build the relationship between the CSCA and the ASA and how they together can work on the future of science and faith. So I just wanted to throw that in before you got going on the discussion of the plenary speakers, and make sure that got in there. Thanks, Randy.
That's great, Bob, and I apologize. You're right. I left that word off. I didn't have the whole title written down and trying to do it from memory, but you're correct, and that is a very important word, and it's got several different levels of meaning, as you pointed out. So thank you very much, Bob, for doing that. Let's see who's next. Tom. Yes, your turn. If you could unmute yourself. Okay.
All right. Just elaborating a little bit more on what Bob said and what you had said earlier, Randy, about the history of ASA and this idea of moving forward together. And it's been on my mind for some time that the statement that united we stand divided, we fall, and I added short, we fall short if we're divided. So I'm thinking of the group in general of scientists that are Christian. And you elaborate on the divisions that have happened. I think it's time that we got our act together and came up with one science where we may have to drop some parts of our belief system, but have a united science that all Christians can agree on. Okay? And having a united front is going to be more influential on the overall system than having splinter groups that we can't even agree amongst ourselves as Christians what the truth of life science really is. So I'd just like to bring.
All right, thank you, Tom. Thank you. Let me just make a comment. The others may want to say something. I think, Tom, that is an absolutely correct ideal. Practically, it won't happen. And I've often said that one of the distinctions between science and faith is that from a big picture perspective, science tends to be convergent and faith, or religions at least, tend to be divergent. And we've seen that throughout history. For religion, inevitably, you find a group that has a slight variation, and they pursue that, they separate from the others, and those groups always continue. Those differences never get resolved. Why? In my opinion, because there is no methodology for doing so. We can all say that our methodology is to center around the Bible or to center around something else, but the interpretations are so open that's not very helpful. And so there tends to be a divergence in the field of religion. In science, there's also a large diversity of opinion, but at least there's a methodology for converging opinions. And in the long run, in most things, it happens. Not always, and not very fast. There are always groups that'll take an opposing view. But at least the mode of collecting data and resolving differences, there is a methodology, even though it can't always be done. So when you're talking about getting a united perspective of science and faith, I think we can have that idealistic interest and goal. But to be honest, I don't see a realistic method of getting there. Is that fair?
I understand what you're saying, and I know that faith is very diverse. But for science, I think your objective is truth. So what is true and what is not true?
Well, the key is, what's the methodology for deciding what is true? And at least from the scientific view, as inadequate as it is, at least there is a framework for such a methodology. And I don't really see that in the religion sense.
Right.
Okay, so I think we should move on. I think we've got Robert next. Bob, thank you, Tom, by the way. I appreciate it.
Randy, could I just make a comment?
Oh, please
in relation, and I think Doc might want to as well. I don't know if it's about the same thing. So first of all, the splinter groups are not always because of disagreement. Sometimes they're just because of focusing on a specific interest. So just that comment.
Or cultural or
exactly. And I think some of the same thing.
That's true. I didn't mean to imply that. Yeah.
Some of the same thing could be said within religion. I think the concept of worldview can be helpful. So our core worldview is going to be the same, but it's in the peripheral aspects of a worldview where there are going to be differences. And I don't think, and so I think the key is that we focus on the core things, what we have in common, what we share, as opposed to focusing on the more peripheral issues. I think that's where some of the problems occur, where people don't recognize that something is a peripheral, not a core issue.
Right. Fair enough. Robert, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, and in a sense, it kind of dovetails on what I was going to say.
Oh, okay.
About addressing something you were talking about, Randy, about the idea of creation care and Christians too quickly jumping on the bandwagon, that anything that sounds like it's great for the environment should be looked at uncritically. And so that's why I've gotten, on this side of the border, lots of questions about the recent fusion results from Livermore in California. And I felt that I should give a perspective as a Christian on this issue to then say that I am a Christian who works in fusion, as opposed to I am someone in fusion who happens to be a Christian. And precisely because of the core values I have, I feel I could look at this critically, and I'm going to talk about it. I won't summarize the talk, obviously, here, but I'm going to talk about it. And just as an encouragement to the people here, I've given in secular audiences this kind of balanced approach, and it was very well received. And so I'd like to add that comment, Randy. Thanks for your comment.
It's very good. Okay, I appreciate that. Now, was that your question, Robert? You had your hand raised before already.
Well, no, I just want to make a comment just to support.
Okay,
what you
and
said.
that was the comment.
Exactly.
Okay, fair enough. All right, very good. Okay, John Wood. Hello, John. Yeah, go ahead.
Dot Chapel has her hand
yourself
up as well.
Yeah, no, she hasn't. Where? Okay, John, unmute yourself. You got it? Okay, let's go.
I've got it. Great, thanks. This is a fascinating conversation, and as you're talking, Randy, about this difference between Christian approaches and secular ones, the various topics, as two things come to mind. I'm reminded of Terry Morrison, chemist, and at University of Wisconsin-Madison, worked with InterVarsity for many years on the graduate and faculty fellowship for many years. And Terry used to talk about molecules in the laboratory. He said there aren't any Christian molecules in the laboratory or on the bench. And much to Bob's point here, Robert, your point on talking about I am a Christian doing this work. And I think that was what Terry was trying to say too, is look, we're people of faith. We happen to be doing this. And I saw this in particular at Berkeley when I went there. My major professor, when he gave me the call to say I'd been accepted into the program, he said, John, there's only one question I need to ask you before you come into this program. This is an evolutionary program in school. He says, is that going to be a problem for you? Now, he and I had not talked faith at all. Apparently, he had talked with my major professor in my master's program, so he got this, got the sense that faith was important to me. And I said to Vince at that point, I said, Vince, not a problem for me if it's not a problem for you, And I think it's in the eye of the beholder here is where this comes from. My experience at Berkeley, I never had to talk about my faith. Other people talked about it for me. And they would invite me into conversations. I had a professor in the lab. I was his TA. And I walked in the office one day and we were talking details of the upcoming lab. And he stopped and sort of mid-sentence and said, John, can you explain to me? I've got these Christian students. They keep coming in trying to save me. And I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
And so I think there's great consternation here, on all sides. I mean, Robert Mann mentioned it before. There are people that are aggressive and having aggressive conversations on all sides. And I'm looking forward to hearing what Donna Strickland has to say. This has been the history of the ASA and CSCA, is that we intentionally don't take positions on issues that have these kind of controversial theological implications so that we can open the conversation, not because we don't have an opinion about it, but that we think that the value is in having the conversation and in engaging people in it. And we've got 80 plus years of doing exactly that. Right. And I'm really quite excited about the program and its breadth to the extent, with one caveat, to the extent, for instance, the whole area, Bob says life sciences, right, are represented. Well, a certain portion of the life sciences are represented in the plenary talks. Another whole part, what we call the skin out biology, the ecological side that I come from, that only comes through on the creation care stuff. And you see it'll be represented in contributed papers. And the social sciences side of the sciences is not as robustly represented in this particular program as it has been in previous ones. But that's the nature of what we do. You can't get the whole breadth of the natural and social sciences represented. Christians are engaged in all kinds of wonderful areas out here, and the kind of work we all do raises very challenging questions. And it's
okay.
So congratulations to the program chairs this year. Excellent program.
Right. Okay. I'll second that. Thank you very much, John. So, okay. So we have reached the hour, which is our nominal cutoff point, but we don't need to. We don't need to cut anyone
Dot
off.
Chappell's had her hand up for quite a while.
Dot, are you having trouble finding the raise hand option? I can't see specific, so you need to find the icon somewhere. But since Robert saved you from that, why don't you unmute yourself and ask your question?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Come back to part of the previous discussion. I do think there's some room for us going back and looking theologically at God's truth. And the major presupposition that we assume is that in lots of ways has to do with the revelations. So we have the revelations through scripture and we have the revelations through creation. And the tools that we use for scripture are things like hermeneutics and language and so on. The tools that we use for nature is science. And so I don't think our youngest generation participants understand the role of science in the context of that larger theological venue. And so I think there's room for discussion of what that means. And then there is a greater understanding of some of the conflicts, but it also reduces some of the conflicts when we understand the role of science within the search for truth. So I would like to see a paper perhaps address that again, or at least some discussion that brings that into perspective for some of the members, particularly the newer members of the ASA.
It sounds good. We look forward to your submitting one of those contributions, Dot.
I'm actually not a theologian, although I read it. I think there are some good theologians who could really develop that well for us.
Okay.
So, Randy, if I know we got to close, but
no, that's all right. We've got time. I don't want to cut anyone off.
In this context, I want to. This is a meta question that I have that I think impacts on all of the things the speakers will say in different ways, and maybe we could leave to think about. There is, at least on Canadian campuses, I expect many, a strong trend toward self-identification. In other words, whatever group a person identifies with, or however a person self-identifies, we are to respect that. So my question is self-identification a scientific concept or not?
Is
what do we make of it?
Self-identification a scientific concept?
Or not? I'll give you examples that have been controversial. The president of Memorial University in Newfoundland identified as Aboriginal, and it was discovered she really wasn't, and she was removed from her position.
Yeah. Right.
So I think for gender issues, for trust in science, for whether we're slaves to our genes, for issues, all of these things, for theological perspective, maybe even artificial intelligence. What does it mean to self-identify? How as a Christian community should we respond to this? And I don't have a great answer for it, but to me, that's a very different kind of science faith issue. Janet Curry, who decides our identity? That's exactly the question.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But we're out of time.
And I'm sure going to have a diversity of answers depending on whose perspective. John Wood, you re-raised your hand. Okay, good. What else?
Yeah, I did, Randy. Thanks. These last two comments are really important, and I'll start with Dot's. Dot raises a really interesting question about the role of science and what it does and how it functions. And one of the important roles of ASA and CSCA is introducing the next generation. It's the way I came into this as an undergraduate.
Yep.
We had an annual meeting in 1965, I think it was, on the North Park College campus in Chicago. And my professors were involved, and for the next 4 years, we heard a lot about the ASA, and I was actually introduced and given a membership. So that bringing that next generation along, Dot, into this peculiar and unique way of seeing the world. Not the only way, but a very unique one. And to that point, we have workshops on Friday. So folks, you may want to tell friends and students that are coming to be sure to arrive on Friday, not Friday night, and you can do the Introduction to Science Faith Conversation, which is one workshop that's going on Friday. There's also one called Developing an Intentional Plan for Your Scholarly Life. And these are very intentional ways that we are trying as an organization to try and build that next generation of thinkers and scholars in their professional development in their fields. So I think that's really important. And then, Bob, to your question, then you're right, the self-identification question, and I don't particularly see that in the program. And maybe you can think about that as program chairs. Is there a way to do sort of these follow-on sort of seed questions into the weekend in some way that are these more overarching kinds of questions? We may not have a mechanism for that. I think this innovation, Randy, of having a conversation about the meeting ahead of the meeting is a really interesting one. This is an interesting innovation, and let's see how it works. But I found it really helpful today.
Well, thank you for the encouragement. I mean, I must say we did this with a lot of trepidation, and we were like, is this going to work? Is anybody going to show up? And fortunately, we had a very, very good turnout, and I found it a very helpful discussion for me. All right, some more comments. Anybody else have something they wish to add? No? Any closing comments from you, Robert or Janet? And you want to reiterate your call for people to attend? And but anything else you want to say?
We still have space for more. If you can encourage people to come, that'd be great. But we're looking forward to what we think will be a very interesting meeting, and we hope as many of you as are online now can attend and at least participate. I agree with what John said. The discussion is important and is part of our Christian journey.
How do the numbers look for admission now? How do the numbers look for?
I think the people who run those numbers aren't here right now.
Last I heard was 235.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
So the last minute surge is about to come. Janet, any comments?
Yeah, again, just thanks to everyone for attending, and like Rob, I'm also excited about the meeting, and not only the content, but also reconnecting with many old friends. Again, we have a really exciting program, not only the plenaries, but also some really unique and interesting and diverse topics that were received as abstracts. And it really was quite a challenge to try and sort through them and put them into groups. And if some of them seem random, I hope you'll forgive us. It was not that easy.
Right. It's always a tough one.
But so it's a lot of lots to choose from.
Okay, that's great. All right. So, Becky, if you could do, maybe you did it already. You put the program link up there. How about the discussion forum link? Again, I don't know that there's a whole lot you want to continue on, but let's keep that discussion forum, subscribe to it in case somebody else does ask something. So in the future, because I believe you can do it in such a way that it covers all the programs. All right. And with that, thank you very much and farewell, and see you next month.